never-on Sunday approach at RC Willey continues to overwhelm 7-day competitors as we roll out stores in new markets. The Boise store, about which I was such a skeptic a few years back, had a 21% gain in 2005, coming off a 10% gain in 2004. Our new Reno store, opened in November, broke out of the gate fast with sales that exceeded Boise's early pace, and we will begin business in Sacramento in June. If this store succeeds as I expect it to, Californians will see many more RC Willey stores in the years to come. In flight services, earnings improved at Flight Safety as corporate aviation continued its rebound. To support growth, we invest heavily in new simulators. Our most recent expansion, bringing us to 42 training centers, is a major facility at Farnborough, England that opened in September. When IT is fully built out in 2007, we will have invested more than $100 million in the building and its 15 simulators. Bruce Whitman, Flight Safety's able CEO, makes sure that no competitor comes close to offering the breadth and depth of services that we do. Operating results at NetJets were a different story. I said last year that this business would earn money in 2005, and I was dead wrong. Our European operation, it should be noted, showed both excellent growth and a reduced loss. Customer contracts there increased by 37%. We are the only fractional ownership operation of any size in Europe, and our now pervasive presence there is a key factor in making NetJets the worldwide leader in this industry. Despite a large increase in customers, however, our U.S. operation dipped far into the red. Its efficiency fell, and costs soared. We believe that our 3 largest competitors suffered similar problems, but each is owned by aircraft manufacturers that may think differently than we do about the necessity of making adequate profits. The combined value of the fleets managed by these 3 competitors, in any case, continues to be less valuable than the fleet that we operate. Rich Santulli, one of the most dynamic managers I've ever met, will solve your revenue expense problem. He won't do it, however, in a manner that impairs the quality of the NetJets experience. Both he and I are committed to a level of service, security and safety that can't be matched by others. Our retailing category includes See's Candies, a company we bought early in 1972, making it our oldest non-insurance business. At that time, Charlie and I immediately decided to put Chuck Huggins, then 46, in charge. Though we were new at the game of selecting managers, Charlie and I hit a home run with this appointment. Chuck's love for the customer and the brand permeated the organization, which in his 34-year tenure produced a more than 10-fold increase in profits. This gain was achieved in an industry growing at best slowly, and perhaps not at all. Volume figures in this industry are hard to pin down. At year-end, Chuck turned the reins at See's over to Brad Kinsler, who previously had served Berkshire well while running Cypress Insurance and Fechheimers. It's unusual for us to move managers around, but Brad's record made him an obvious choice for the See's job. I hope Chuck and his wife Donna are at the annual meeting. If they are, shareholders can join Charlie and me in giving America's #1 candy maker a richly deserved round of applause. Every day, in countless ways, the competitive position of each of our businesses grows either weaker or stronger. If we are delighting customers, eliminating unnecessary costs and improving our products and services, we gain strength. But if we treat customers with indifference or tolerate bloat, our businesses will wither. On a daily basis, the effects of our actions are imperceptible. Cumulatively, though, their consequences are enormous. When our long-term competitive position improves as a result of these almost unnoticeable actions, we describe the phenomenon as widening the moat. And doing that is essential if we are to have the kind of business we want a decade or 2 from now. We always, of course, hope to earn more money in the short term. But when short-term and long-term conflict, widening the moat must take precedence. If a management makes bad decisions in order to hit short-term earnings targets, and consequently gets behind the 8 ball in terms of costs, customer satisfaction or brand strength, no amount of subsequent brilliance will overcome the damage that has been inflicted. Take a look at the dilemmas of managers in the auto and airline industries today, as they struggle with the huge problems handed them by their predecessors. Charlie is fond of quoting Ben Franklin's, "An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure." But sometimes no amount of cure will overcome the mistakes of the past. Our managers focus on moat widening, and are brilliant at it. Quite simply, they are passionate about their businesses. Usually, they were running those long before we came along. Our only function since has been to stay out of the way. If you see these heroes and our 4 heroines as well at the annual meeting, thank them for the job they do for you. The attitude of our managers vividly contrasts with that of the young man who married a tycoon's only child, a decidedly homely and dull lass. Relieved, the father called in his new son-in-law after the wedding and began to discuss the future. "Son, you're the boy I always wanted and never had. Here's a stock certificate for 50% of the company. You're my equal partner from now on. Thanks, Dad. Now, what would you like to run? How about sales? I'm afraid I couldn't sell water to a man crawling in the Sahara. Well then, how about heading human relations? I really don't care for people. No problem, we have lots of other spots in the business. What would you like to do? Actually, nothing appeals to me. Why don't you just buy me out? Investments. We show below our common stock investments. Those that had a market value of more than $700 million at the end of 2005 are itemized. A couple of last year's changes in our portfolio occurred because of corporate events. Gillette was merged into Procter & Gamble, and American Express spun off Ameriprise. In addition, we substantially increased our holdings in Wells Fargo, a company that Dick Kovacevic runs brilliantly, and established positions in Anheuser-Busch and Walmart. Expect no miracles from our equity portfolio. Though we own major interests in a number of strong, highly profitable businesses, they are not selling at anything like bargain prices. As a group, they may double in value in 10 years. The likelihood is that their per-share earnings, in aggregate, will grow 68% per year over the decade, and that their stock prices will more or less match that growth. Their managers, of course, think my expectations are too modest, and I hope they're right. The P&G Gillette merger, closing in the fourth quarter of 2005, required Berkshire to record a $5.0 billion pre-tax capital gain. This bookkeeping tree, dictated by GAAP, is meaningless from an economic standpoint, and you should ignore it when you are evaluating Berkshire's 2005 earnings. We didn't intend to sell our Gillette shares before the merger. We don't intend to sell our P&G shares now, and we incurred no tax when the merger took place. It's hard to overemphasize the importance of who is CEO of a company. Before Jim Kilts arrived at Gillette in 2001, the company was struggling, having particularly suffered from capital allocation blunders. In the Major example, Gillette's acquisition of Duracell cost Gillette shareholders billions of dollars, a loss never made visible by conventional accounting. Quite simply, what Gillette received in business value in this acquisition was not equivalent to what it gave up. Amazingly, this most fundamental of yardsticks is almost always ignored by both managements and their investment bankers when acquisitions are under discussion. Upon taking office at Gillette, Jim quickly instilled fiscal discipline, tightened operations and energized marketing, moves that dramatically increased the intrinsic value of the company. Gillette's merger with P&G expanded the potential of both companies. For his accomplishments, Jim was paid very well, but he earned every penny. This is no academic valuation. As a 9.7% owner of Gillette, Berkshire, in effect, paid that proportion of his compensation. Indeed, it's difficult to overpay the true extraordinary CEO of a giant enterprise. But this species is rare. Too often, executive compensation in the U.S. is ridiculously out of line with performance. That won't change, moreover, because the deck is stacked against investors when it comes to the CEO's pay. The upshot is that a mediocre, or worse CEO, aided by his hand-picked VP of Human Relations and a consultant from the ever-accommodating firm of Ratchet and Bingo, all too often receives gobs of money from an ill-designed compensation arrangement. Take, for instance, 10-year, fixed-price options, and who wouldn't? If Fred Feudal, CEO of Stagnant Incorporated, receives a bundle of these, let's say enough to give him an option on 1% of the company, his self-interest is clear. He should skip dividends entirely and instead use all of the company's earnings to repurchase stock. Let's assume that under Fred's leadership, Stagnant lives up to its name. In each of the 10 years after the option grant, it earns $1 billion on $10 billion of net worth, which initially comes to $10 per share on the 100 million shares then outstanding. Fred issues dividends and regularly uses earnings to repurchase shares. If the stock constantly sells at 10 times earnings per share, it will have appreciated 158% by the end of the option period. That's because repurchases would reduce the number of shares to 38.7 million by that time, and earnings per share would thereby increase to $25.8. Simply by withholding earnings from owners, Fred gets very rich, making a cool $158 million, despite the business itself improving not at all. Astonishingly, Fred could have made more than $100 million if Stagnant's earnings had declined by 20% during the 10-year period. Fred can also get a splendid result for himself by paying no dividends and deploying the earnings he withholds from shareholders into a variety of disappointing projects and acquisitions. Even if these initiatives deliver a paltry 5% return, Fred will still make a bundle. Specifically, with Stagnant's P/E ratio remaining unchanged at 10, Fred's option will deliver him $63 million. Meanwhile, his shareholders will wonder what happened to the alignment of interests that was supposed to occur when Fred was issued options. A normal dividend policy, of course 1/3 of earnings paid out, for example, produces less extreme results but still can provide lush rewards for managers who achieve nothing. CEOs understand this math and know that every dime paid out in dividends reduces the value of all outstanding options. I've never, however, seen this manager-owner conflict referenced in proxy materials that request approval of a fixed-priced option plan. Though CEOs invariably preach internally that capital comes at a cost, they somehow forget to tell shareholders that fixed-price options give them capital that is free. It doesn't have to be this way. It's child's play for a board to design options that give effect to the automatic buildup in value that occurs when earnings are retained. But surprise options of that kind are almost never issued. Indeed, the very thought of options with strike prices that are adjusted for retained earnings seems foreign to compensation experts, who are nevertheless encyclopedic about every management-friendly plan that exists. Whose bread I eat, his song I sing. Getting fired can produce a particularly bountiful payday for a CEO. Indeed, he can earn more in that single day, while cleaning out his desk, than an American worker earns in a lifetime of cleaning toilets. Forget the old maxim about nothing succeeding like success. Today, in the executive suite, the all-too prevalent rule is that nothing succeeds like failure. Huge severance payments, lavish perks, and outsized payments for ho-hum performance often occur because comp committees have become slaves to comparative data. The drill is simple. 3 or so directors not chosen by chance are bombarded for a few hours before a board meeting with pay statistics that perpetually ratchet upwards. Additionally, the committee is told about new perks that other managers are receiving. In this manner, outlandish goodies are showered upon CEOs simply because of a corporate version of the argument we all used when children. But Mom, all the other kids have one. When comp committees follow this logic, yesterday's most egregious excess becomes today's baseline. Comp committees should adopt the attitude of Hank Greenberg, the Detroit Slugger and a boyhood hero of mine. Hank's son, Steve, at one time was a player's agent. Representing an outfielder in negotiations with a major league club, Steve sounded out his dad about the size of the signing bonus he should ask for. Hank, a true pay-for-performance guy, got straight to the point. What did he hit last year? When Steve answered 246, Hank's comeback was immediate. Ask for a uniform. Let me pause for a brief confession. In criticizing comp committee behavior, I don't speak as a true insider. Though I have served as a director of 20 public companies, only one CEO has put me on his comp committee. My views on America's long-term problem in respect to trade imbalances, which I have laid out in previous reports, remain unchanged. My conviction, however, cost Berkshire $955 million pre-tax in 2005. That amount is included in our earnings statement, a fact that illustrates the differing ways in which GAAP treats gains and losses. When we have a long-term position in stocks or bonds, year-to-year changes in value are reflected in our balance sheet, but, as long as the asset is not sold, are rarely reflected in earnings. For example, our Coca-Cola holdings went from $1 billion in value early on to $13.4 billion at year-end 1998 and have since declined to $8.1 billion, with none of these moves affecting our earnings statement. Long-term currency positions, however, are daily marked to market and therefore have an effect in earnings in every reporting period. From the date we first entered into currency contracts, we are $2 billion in the black. We reduced our direct position in currencies somewhat during 2005. We partially offset this change, however, by purchasing equities whose prices are denominated in a variety of foreign currencies and that earn a large part off their profits internationally. Charlie and I prefer this method of acquiring non-dollar exposure. That's largely because of changes in interest rates. As U.S. rates have risen, relative to those of the rest of the world, holding most foreign currencies now involves a significant negative carry. The carry aspect of our direct currency position indeed cost us money in 2005, and is likely to do so again in 2006. In contrast, the ownership of foreign equities is likely, over time, to create a positive carry, perhaps a substantial one. The underlying factors affecting the U.S. current account deficit continue to worsen, and no let-up is in sight. Not only did our trade deficit, the large stand most familiar item in the current account, hit an all-time high in 2005, but we also can expect a second item, the balance of investment income, to soon turn negative. As foreigners increase their ownership of U.S. assets, or of claims against us, relative to U.S. investments abroad, these investors will begin earning more on their holdings than we do on ours. Finally, the third component of the current account, unilateral transfers, is always negative. The U.S., it should be emphasized, is extraordinarily rich and will get richer. As a result, the huge imbalances in its current account may continue for a long time without there having noticeable deleterious effects on the U.S. economy or on markets. I doubt, however, that the situation will forever remain benign. Either Americans address the problem soon in a way we select, or at some point the problem will likely address us in an unpleasant way of its own. How to minimize investment returns. It's been an easy matter for Berkshire and other owners of American equities to prosper over the years. Between the 31st of December 1899 and December 31,199, to give a really long-term example, the Dow rose from 66 to 11,497. Guess what annual growth rate is required to produce this result? The surprising answer is at the end of this section. This huge rise came about for a simple reason. Over the century, American businesses did extraordinarily well, and investors rode the wave of their prosperity. Businesses continue to do well. But now shareholders, through a series of self-inflicted wounds, are in a major way cutting the returns they will realize from their investments. The explanation of how this is happening begins with a fundamental truth. With unimportant exceptions such as bankruptcies in which some of a company's losses are borne by creditors, the most that owners in aggregate can earn between now and Judgment Day is what their businesses in aggregate earn. True, by buying and selling that is clever or lucky, Investor A may take more than his share of the pie at the expense of Investor B. And, yes, all investors feel richer when stocks soar. But an owner can exit only by having someone take his place. If one investor sells high, another must buy high. For owners as a whole, there is simply no magic, no shower of money from outer space that will enable them to extract wealth from their companies beyond that created by the companies themselves. Indeed, owners must earn less than their businesses earn because of frictional costs. And that's my point. These costs are now being incurred in amounts that will cause shareholders to earn far less than they historically have. To understand how this toll has ballooned, imagine for a moment that all American corporations are, and always will be, owned by a single family. We'll call them the Gotrocks. After paying taxes on dividends, this family generation after generation becomes richer by the aggregate amount earned by its companies. Today that amount is about $700 billion annually. Naturally, the family spends some of these dollars. But the portion it saves steadily compounds for its benefit. In the Gotrocks household, every grows wealthier at the same pace, and all is harmonious. But let's now assume that a few fast-talking helpers approach the family and persuade each of its members to try to outsmart his relatives by buying certain of their holdings and selling them certain others. The helpers for AFI, of course, obligingly agree to handle these transactions. The Gotrocks still own all of corporate America. The trades just rearrange who owns what. So the family's annual gain in wealth diminishes, equaling the earnings of American business minus commissions paid. The more that family members trade, the smaller their share of the pie, and the larger the slice received by the helpers. This fact is not lost upon these broker helpers. Activity is their friend, and in a wide variety of ways, they urge it on. After a while, most of the family members realize that they are not doing so well at this new beat me brother game. Enter another set of helpers. The newcomers explain to each member of the Gotrocks clan that by himself he'll never outsmart the rest of the family. The suggested cure: hire a manager, yes, us, and get the job done professionally. These helpers continue to use the broker helpers to execute trades. The managers may even increase their activity so as to permit the brokers to prosper still more. Overall, a bigger slice of the pie now goes to the two classes of helpers. The family's disappointment grows. Each of its members is now employing professionals. Yet overall, the group's finances have taken a turn for the worse. The solution? More help, of course. It arrives in the form of financial planners and institutional consultants, weigh in to advise the Gotrox on selecting manager helpers. The befuddled family welcomes this assistance. By now its members know they can pick neither the right stocks nor the right stock pickers. Why, one might ask, should they expect success in picking the right consultant? But this question does not occur to the Gotrox, and the consultant helpers certainly don't suggest it to them. The Gotrox, now supporting 3 classes of expensive helpers, find that their results get worse, and they sink into despair. But just as hope seems lost, a 4th group, we'll call them the hyper helpers, appears. These friendly folk explain to the Gotrox that their unsatisfactory results are occurring because the existing helpers, brokers, managers, consultants are not sufficiently motivated and are simply going through the motions. What? The new helpers ask. Can you expect from such a bunch of zombies? The new arrivals offer a breathtakingly simple solution. Pay more money. Brimming with self-confidence, the hyper-helpers assert that huge contingent payments in addition to stiff fixed fees are what each family member must fork over in order to really outmaneuver his relatives. The more observant members of the family see that some of the hyper-helpers are really just manager helpers wearing new uniforms, bearing so non-sexy names like hedge fund or private equity. The new helpers, however, assure the Gotrox that this change of clothing is all important, bestowing on its wearers magical powers similar to those acquired by mild-mannered Clark Kent when he changed into his Superman costume. Calmed by this explanation, the family decides to pay up. And that's where we are today. A record portion of the earnings that would go in their entirety to owners if they all just stayed in their rocking chairs is now going to a swelling army of helpers. Particularly expensive is the recent pandemic of profit arrangements, under which helpers receive large portions of the winnings when they are smart or lucky, and leave family members with all of the losses and large fixed fees to boot when the helpers are dumb or unlucky, or occasionally crooked. A sufficient number of arrangements like this heads, the helper takes much of the winnings. Tails, the Gotrox lose and pay dearly for the privilege of doing so may make it more accurate to call the family the Hadrox. Today, in fact, the family's frictional costs of all sorts may well amount to 20% of the earnings of American business. In other words, the burden of paying helpers may cause American equity investors, overall, turn only 80% or so of what they would earn if they just sat still and listened to no one. Long ago, Sir Isaac Newton gave us 3 laws of motion, which were the work of genius. But Sir Isaac's talents didn't extend to investing. He lost a bundle in the South Sea bubble, explaining later, I can calculate the movement of the stars, but not the madness of men. If he had not been traumatized by this loss, Sir Isaac might well have gone on to discover the 4th law of motion. For investors as a whole, returns decrease as motion increases. Asterisk 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 asterisk. Here's the answer to the question posed at the beginning of this section. To get very specific, the Dow increased from 6,573 to 11,497. 12 inches the 20th century, and that amounts to a gain of 5.3% compounded annually. Investors would also have received dividends, of course. To achieve an equal rate of gain in the 21st century, the Dow will have to rise by the 31st of December 2099 to brace yourself precisely 2,011,011.23. But I'm willing to settle for 2 million. 6 years into the century, the Dow has gained not at all. Debt and risk. As we consolidate Mid-American, our new balance sheet may suggest that Berkshire has expanded its tolerance for borrowing. But that's not so. Except for token amounts, we shun debt, turning to it for only 3 purposes. 1. We occasionally use repos as a part of certain short-term investing strategies that incorporate ownership of U.S. government or agency securities. Purchases of this kind are highly opportunistic and involve only the most liquid of securities. A few years ago, we entered in several interesting transactions that have since been unwound or are running off. The offsetting debt has likewise been cut substantially, and before long may be gone. We borrow money against portfolios of interest-bearing receivables whose risk characteristics we understand. We did this in 2001 when we guaranteed $5.6 billion of bank debt to take over, in partnership with Leucadia, a bankrupt Finova, which held a broad range of receivables. All of that debt has been repaid. More recently, we have borrowed to finance a widely diversified, predictably performing portfolio of manufactured home receivables managed by Clayton. Alternatively, we could securitize, that is, sell these receivables, but retain the servicing of them. If we followed this procedure, which is common in the industry, we would not show the debt that we do on our balance sheet, and we would also accelerate the earnings we report. In the end, however, we would earn less money. Were market variables to change so as to favor securitization, an unlikely event, we could sell part of our portfolio and eliminate the related debt. Until then, we prefer better profits to better cosmetics. 3. At Mid-American, we have substantial debt, but it is that company's obligation only. Though it will appear on our consolidated balance sheet, Berkshire does not guarantee it. Even so, this debt is unquestionably secure because it is serviced by Mid-American's diversified stream of highly stable utility earnings. If there were to be some bolt from the blue that hurt one of Mid-American's utility properties, earnings from the others would still be more than ample to cover all debt requirements. Moreover, Mid-American retains all of its earnings, an equity-building practice that is rare in the utility field. From a risk standpoint, it is far safer to have earnings from 10 diverse and uncorrelated utility operations that cover interest charges by, say, a 2:1 ratio than it is to have far greater coverage provided by a single utility. A catastrophic event can render a single utility insolvent. Witness what Katrina did to the local electric utility in New Orleans, no matter how conservative its debt policy. A geographical disaster, say, an earthquake in a western state can't have the same effect on Mid-American. And even a worrier like Charlie can't think of an event that would systemically decrease utility earnings in any major way. Because of Mid-American's ever-widening diversity of regulated earnings, it will always utilize major amounts of debt. And that's about it. We are not interested in incurring any significant debt at Berkshire for acquisitions or operating purposes. Conventional business wisdom, of course, would argue that we are being too conservative, and that there are added profits that could be safely earned if we injected moderate leverage into our balance sheet. Maybe so. But many of Berkshire's hundreds of thousands of investors have a large portion of their net worth in our stock. Among them, it should be emphasized, a large number of our board and key managers, and a disaster for the company would be a disaster for them. Moreover, there are people who have been permanently injured to whom we owe insurance payments that stretch out for 50 years or more. To these and other constituencies we have promised total security, whatever comes. Financial panics, stock exchange closures, an extended one occurred in 1914, or even domestic nuclear, chemical, or biological attacks. We are quite willing to accept huge risks. Indeed, more than any other insurer, we write high-limit policies that are tied to single catastrophe events. We also own a large investment portfolio, whose market value could fall dramatically and quickly under certain conditions, as happened on October 19, 1987. Whatever occurs, though, Berkshire will have the net worth, the earnings streams, and the liquidity to handle the problem with ease. Any other approach is dangerous. Over the years, a number of very smart people have learned the hard way that a long string of impressive numbers multiplied by a single zero always equals zero. That is not an equation whose effects I would like to experience personally, and I would like Evenless to be responsible for imposing its penalties upon others. Management succession. As owners, you are naturally concerned about whether I will insist on continuing as CEO after I begin to fade, and if so, how the board will handle that problem. You also want to know what happens if I should die tonight. That second question is easy to answer. Most of our many businesses have strong market positions, significant momentum, and terrific managers. The special Berkshire culture is deeply ingrained throughout our subsidiaries, and these operations won't miss a beat when I die. Moreover, we have 3 managers at Berkshire who are reasonably young and fully capable of being CEO. Any of the 3 would be much better at certain management aspects of my job than I. On the minus side, none has me crossover experience that allows me to be comfortable making decisions in either the business arena or in investments. That problem will be solved by having another person in the organization handle marketable securities. That's an interesting job at Berkshire. And the new CEO will have no problem in hiring a talented individual to do it. Indeed, that's what we have done at Geico for 26 years, and our results have been terrific. Berkshire's board has fully discussed each of the 3 CEO candidates and has unanimously agreed on the person who should succeed me if our placement were needed today. The directors stay updated on this subject and could alter their view. As circumstances change, new managerial stars may emerge, and present ones will age. The important point is that the directors know now and will always know in the future exactly what they will do when the need arises. The other question that must be addressed is whether the board will be prepared to make a change if that need should arise, not from my death, but rather from my decay, particularly if this decay is accompanied by my delusionally thinking that I am reaching new peaks of managerial brilliance. That problem would not be unique to me. Charlie and I have faced this situation from time to time at Berkshire's subsidiaries. Humans age at greatly varying rates, but sooner or later their talents and vigor decline. Some managers remain effective well into their 80 seconds. Charlie is a wonder at 82, and others noticeably fade in their 60 seconds. When their abilities ebb, socially do their powers of self-assessment. Someone else often needs to blow the whistle. When that time comes for me, our board will have to step up to the job. From a financial standpoint, its members are unusually motivated to do so. I know of no other board in the country in which the financial interests of directors are so completely aligned with those of shareholders. Few boards come close. On a personal level, however, it is extraordinarily difficult for most people to tell someone, particularly a friend, that he or she is no longer capable. If I become a candidate for that message, however, our board will be doing a favor by delivering it. Every share of Berkshire that I own is destined to go to philanthropies, and I want society to reap the maximum good from these gifts and bequests. It would be a tragedy if the philanthropic potential of my holdings was diminished because my associates shirked their responsibility to, tenderly, I hope, show me the door. But don't worry about this. We have an outstanding group of directors, and they will always do what's right for shareholders. And while we are on the subject, I feel terrific. The annual meeting. Our meeting this year will be on Saturday, May 6. As always, the doors will open at the Q West Center at 7 a.m., and the latest Berkshire movie will be shown at 8:30. At 9:30, we will go directly to the question and answer period, which, with a break for lunch at the Q West stands, will last until 3:00. Then, after a short recess, Charlie and I will convene the annual meeting at 3:15. This schedule worked well last year, because it let those who wanted to attend the formal session to do so, while freeing others to shop. You certainly did your share in this respect last year. The 194,300 square foot hall adjoining the meeting area was filled with the products of Berkshire subsidiaries, and the 21,000 people who came to the meeting allowed every location to rack up sales records. Kelly Bros, Niemukmore, the Flo Ziegfeld of Berkshire, orchestrates both this magnificent shopping extravaganza and the meeting itself. The exhibitors love her, and so do I. Kelly got married in October, and I gave her away. She asked me how I wanted to be listed in the wedding program. I replied, envious of the groom, and that's the way it went to press. This year, we will showcase 2 Clayton homes, featuring Acme Brick, Shaw Carpet, Johns Manville Insulation, MyTech Fasteners, Carefree Awning Sand, and FM Furniture. You will find that these homes, priced at $79,000 and $89,000, deliver excellent value. In fact, 3 shareholders came so firmly to that conclusion last year that they bought the $119,000 model we then showcased. Flanking the Clayton homes on the exhibition floor will be RVs from Forest River. Geico will have a booth staffed by a number of its top counselors from around the country, all of them ready to supply you with auto insurance quotes. In most cases, Geico will be able to give you a special shareholder discount, usually 8%. This special offer is permitted by 45 of the 50 jurisdictions in which we operate. One supplemental point. The discount is not additive if you qualify for another, such as that given certain groups. Bring the details of your existing insurance and check out whether we can save you money. For at least 50% of you, I believe we can. And while you're at it, sign up for the new Geico credit card. It's the one I now use. On Saturday, at the Omaha Airport, we will have the usual array of aircraft from NetJets available for your inspection. Stop by the NetJets booth at the Q West to learn about viewing these planes. Come to Omaha by bus, leave in your new plane. The Bookworm Boutique at the Q West broke all records last year selling Berkshire-related books. An amazing 3,500 of these were Poor Charlie's Almanac, the collected wisdom of my partner. This means that a copy was sold every 9 seconds. And for good reason. You will never find a book with more useful ideas. Word-of-mouth recommendations have caused Charlie's first printing of 20,500 copies to sell out, and we will therefore have a revised and expanded edition on sale at our meeting. Among the other Tutu titles and DVDs available last year at the Bookworm, 4,597 copies were sold for $84,746. Our shareholders are a bookseller's dream. An attachment to the proxy material that is enclosed with this report explains how you can obtain the credential you will need for admission to the meeting and other events. As for plane, hotel, and car reservations, we have again signed up American Express 800-799-6634 to give you special help. Carol Pedersen, who handles these matters, does a terrific job for us each year, and I thank her for it. At Nebraska Furniture Mart, located on a 77-acre site on 72nd Street between Dodge and Pacific, we will again be having Berkshire weekend pricing. We initiated this special event at NFM 9 years ago, and sales during the weekend grew from $5.3 million in 1997 to $27.4 million in 2005, up 9% from a year earlier. I get goosebumps just thinking about this volume. To obtain the discount, you must make your purchases between Thursday, May 4 and Monday, May 8 inclusive, and also present your meeting credential. The period's special pricing will even apply to the products of several prestigious manufacturers that normally have ironclad rules against discounting, but that, in the spirit of our shareholder weekend, have made an exception for you. We appreciate their cooperation. NFM is open from 10 a.m. to 9 p.m., Monday through Saturday, and 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Sunday. On Saturday this year, from 5:30 p.m. to 8 p.m., we are having a special affair for shareholders only. I'll be there, eating barbecue, drinking Coke, and counting sales. Borsheim's again will have 2 shareholder-only events. The first will be a cocktail reception from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. on Friday, May 5th. The second, the main gala, will be from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. on Sunday, May 7. On Saturday, we will be open until 6 p.m. We will have huge crowds at Borsheim's throughout the weekend. For your convenience, therefore, shareholder prices will be available from Monday, May 1 through Saturday, May 13. During that period, just identify yourself as a shareholder through your meeting credentials or a brokerage statement. Borsheim's operates on a gross margin that, even before the shareholder's discount, is fully 20 percentage points below that of its major rivals. Last year, our shareholder period business increased 9% from 2004, which came on top of a 73% gain the year before. The store sold 5,000 Berkshire Monopoly games and then ran out. We've learned plenty will be in stock this year. In a tent outside of Borsheim's, Patrick Wolf, twice U.S. chess champion, will take on all comers in groups of 6 blindfolded. Additionally, we will have Bob Hammond and Sharon Osberg, 2 of the world's top bridge experts, available to play with our shareholders on Sunday afternoon. They plan to keep their eyes open, but Bob never sorts his cards, even when playing for a national championship. Gorat's My Favorite Steakhouse will again be open exclusively for Berkshire shareholders on Sunday, May 7, and will be serving from 4 p.m. until 10 p.m. Please remember that to come to Gorat's on that day, you must have a reservation. To make one, call 402-551-3733 on April 1, but note before. In this school year, about 35 university classes will come to Omaha for sessions with me. I take almost all in aggregate, perhaps 2,000 students to lunch at Gorat's, and they love it. To learn why, come join us on Sunday. We will again have a special reception from 4 to 5:30 on Saturday afternoon for shareholders who have come from outside of North America. Every year our meeting draws many people from around the globe, and Charlie and I want to be sure we personally greet those who have come so far. Last year we enjoyed meeting more than 400 of you from many dozens of countries. Any shareholder who comes from other than the U.S. or Canada will be given a special credential and instructions for attending this function. Charlie and I are extraordinarily lucky. We were born in America, had terrific parents who saw that we got good educations, have enjoyed wonderful families and great health, and came equipped with a business gene that allows us to prosper in a manner hugely disproportionate to other people who contribute as much or more to our society's well-being. Moreover, we have long had jobs that we love, in which we are helped every day in countless ways by talented and cheerful associates. No wonder we tap dance to work. But nothing is more fun for us than getting together with our shareholder partners at Berkshire's annual meeting. So join us on May 6th at the Q West for our annual Woodstock for Capitalists. We'll see you there. The 28th of February, 2006. Warren E. Buffett, Chairman of the Board, Berkshire Hathaway Inc. To the shareholders of Berkshire Hathaway Incorporated, our gain in net worth during 2006 was $16.9 billion, which increased the per-share book value of both our Class A and Class B stock by 18.4%. Over the last 42 years, that is, since present management took over, book value has grown from $19 to $70,281, a rate of 21.4% compounded annually. Asterisk. All per-share figures used in this report apply to Berkshire's A shares. Figures for the B shares are 1/30 of those shown for the A. We believe that $16.9 billion is a record for a one-year gain in net worth more than has ever been booked by any American business, leaving aside boosts that have occurred because of mergers. For example, AOL's purchase of Time Warner. Of course, ExxonMobil and other companies earn far more than Berkshire, but their earnings largely go to dividends or repurchases, rather than to building net worth. All that said, a confession about our 2006 gain is in order. Our most important business, insurance, benefited from a large dose of luck. Mother Nature, bless her heart, went on vacation. After hammering us with hurricanes in 2004 and 2005, storms that caused us to lose a bundle on Super Cat insurance, she just vanished. Last year, the red ink from this activity turned black, very black. In addition, the great majority of our 73 businesses did outstandingly well in 2006. Let me focus for a moment on one of our largest operations, Geico. What management accomplished there was simply extraordinary. As I've told you before, Tony Nicely, Geico's CEO, went to work at the company 45 years ago, 2 months after turning 18. He became CEO in 1992, and from then on the company's growth exploded. In addition, Ton has delivered staggering productivity gains in recent years. Between year-end 2003 and year-end 2006, the number of Geico policies increased from 5.7 million to 8.1 million, a jump of 42%. Yet during that same period, company's employees, measured on a full-time equivalent basis, fell 3.5%. So productivity grew 47%. And Geico didn't start fat. That remarkable gain has allowed Geico to maintain its all-important position as a low-cost producer, even though it has dramatically increased advertising expenditures. Last year, Geico spent $631 million on ads, up from $238 million in 2003, and up from $31 million in 1995, when Berkshire took control. Today, Geico spends far more on ads than any of its competitors, even those much larger. We will continue to raise the bar. Last year I told you that if you had a new son or grandson, to be sure to name him Tony. But Don Keogh, a Berkshire director, recently had a better idea. After reviewing Geico's performance in 2006, he wrote me, "Forget births. Tell the shareholders to immediately change the names of their present children to Tony or Antoinette." Don signed his letter Tony. Charlie Munger, my partner, and Berkshire's vice chairman, and I run what has turned out to be a big business, one with 217,000 employees and annual revenues approaching $100 billion. We certainly didn't plan it that way. Charlie began as a lawyer, and I thought of myself as a security analyst. Sitting in those seats, we both grew skeptical about the ability of big entities of any type to function well. Size seems to make many organizations slow-thinking, resistant to change, and smug. In Churchill's words, "We shape our buildings, and afterwards our buildings shape us." Here's a telling fact. Of the 10 non-oil companies having the largest market capitalization in 1965 titans, such as General Motors, Sears, DuPont, and Eastman Kodak, only one made the 2006 list. In fairness, we've seen plenty of successes as well, some truly outstanding. There are many giant company managers whom I greatly admire. Ken Chenault of American Express, Jeff Immelt of GE, and Dick Kovacevich of Wells Fargo come quickly to mind. But I don't think I could do the management job they do. And I know I wouldn't enjoy many of the duties that come with their positions: meetings, speeches, foreign travel, the charity circuit, and governmental relations. For me, Ronald Reagan had it right. It's probably true that hard work never killed anyone, but why take the chance? So I've taken the easy route, just sitting back and working through great managers who run their own shows. My only tasks are to cheer them on, sculpt and harden our corporate culture, and make major capital allocation decisions. Our managers have returned this trust by working hard and effectively for their performance over the last 42 years, and particularly for 2006. Charlie and I thank them. Yardsticks. Charlie and I measure Berkshire's progress and evaluate its intrinsic value in a number of ways. No single criterion is effective in doing these jobs, and even an avalanche of statistics will not capture some factors that are important. For example, it's essential that we have managers much younger than I available to succeed me. Berkshire has never been in better shape in this regard, but I can't prove it to you with numbers. There are two statistics, however, that are of real importance. The first is the amount of investments, including cash and cash equivalents, that we own on a per-share basis. Arriving at this figure, we exclude investments held in our finance operation because these are largely offset by borrowings. Here's the record since present management acquired control of Berkshire. In our early years, we put most of our retained earnings and insurance float into investments in marketable securities. Because of this emphasis, and because the securities we purchased generally did well, our growth rate in investments was for a long time quite high. Over the years, however, we have focused more and more on the acquisition of operating businesses. Using our funds for these purchases has both slowed our growth in investments and accelerated our gains in pre-tax earnings from non-insurance businesses. The second yardstick we use. Here's how those earnings have looked. Last year we had a good increase in non-insurance earnings, 38%. Large gains from here on in, though, will come only if we are able to make major and sensible acquisitions. That will not be easy. We do, however, have one advantage. More and more, Berkshire has become the buyer of choice for business owners and managers. Initially, we were viewed that way only in the US, and more often than not by private companies. We've long wanted, nonetheless, to extend Berkshire's appeal beyond US borders. And last year, our globetrotting finally got underway. Acquisitions. We began 2006 by completing the 3 acquisitions pending at year-end 2005, spending about $6 billion for PacifiCorp, BusinessWire, and Applied Underwriters. All are performing very well. The highlight of the year, however, was our July 5th acquisition of most of Iskar, an Israeli company, and our new association with its chairman, Eitan Wertheimer, and CEO, Jacob Harpaz. The story here began on October 25, 2005, when I received a 1/4-page letter from Eitan, of whom I then knew nothing. The letter began, "I am writing to introduce you to Iskar," and proceeded to describe a cutting tool business carried on in 61 countries. Then Eitan wrote, "We have for some time considered the issues of generational transfer and ownership that are typical for large family enterprises, and have given much thought to Iskar's future. Our conclusion is that Berkshire Hathaway would be the ideal home for Iskar. We believe that Iskar would continue to thrive as a part of your portfolio of businesses." Overall, Eitan's letter made the quality of the company and the character of its management leap off the page. It also made me want to learn more, and in November, Eitan, Jacob, and Iskar's CFO, Danny Goldman, came to Omaha. A few hours with them convinced me that if we were to make a deal, we would be teaming up with extraordinarily talented managers who could be trusted to run the business after a sale with all of the energy and dedication that they had exhibited previously. However, having never bought a business based outside of the US, though I had bought a number of foreign stocks, I needed to get educated on some tax and jurisdictional matters. With that task completed, Berkshire purchased 80% of Iskar for $4 billion. The remaining 20% stays in the hands of the Wertheimer family, making it our valued partner. Iskar's products are small, consumable cutting tools that are used in conjunction with large and expensive machine tools. It's a business without magic except for that imparted by the people who run it. But Eitan, Jacob, and their associates are true managerial magicians who constantly develop tools that make their customers' machines more productive. The result? Iskar makes money because it enables its customers to make more money. There is no better recipe for continued success. In September, Charlie and I, along with 5 Berkshire associates, visited Iskar in Israel. We, and I mean every one of us, have never been more impressed with any operation. At Iskar, as throughout Israel, brains and energy are ubiquitous. Berkshire shareholders are lucky to have joined with Eitan, Jacob, Danny, and their talented associates. A few months later, Berkshire again became the buyer of choice, in a deal brought to us by my friend John Roach of Fort Worth. John, many of you will remember, was chairman of Justin Industries, which we bought in 2000. At that time, John was helping John Justin, who was terminally ill, find a permanent home for his company. John Justin died soon after we bought Justin Industries, but it has since been run exactly as we promised him it would be. Visiting me in November, John Roach brought along Paul Andrews Jr., owner of about 80% of TTI, a Fort Worth distributor of electronic components. Over a 35-year period, Paul built TTI from $112,000 of sales to $1.3 billion. He is a remarkable entrepreneur and operator. Paul, 64, loves running his business. But not long ago he happened to witness how disruptive the death of a founder can be both to a private company's employees and the owner's family. What starts out as disruptive, furthermore, often evolves into destructive. About a year ago, therefore, Paul began to think about selling TTI. His goal was to put his business in the hands of an owner he had carefully chosen, rather than allowing a trust officer or lawyer to conduct an auction after his death. Paul rejected the idea of a strategic buyer, knowing that in the pursuit of synergies, an owner of that type would be apt to dismantle what he had so carefully built, a move that would uproot hundreds of his associates, and perhaps wound TTI's business in the process. He also ruled out a private equity firm, which would very likely load the company with debt and then flip it as soon as possible. That left Berkshire. Paul and I met on the morning of November 15th and made a deal before lunch. Later he wrote me, "After our meeting, I am confident that Berkshire is the right owner for TTI. I am proud of our past and excited about our future. And so are Charlie and I." We also made some tuck-in acquisitions during 2006 at Fruit of the Loom, Fruit, Mytech, CTB, Shaw, and Clayton. Fruit made the largest purchases. First, it bought Russell Corp., a leading producer of athletic apparel and uniforms, for about $1.2 billion, including assumed debt, and in December it agreed to buy the intimate apparel business of VF Corp. Together, these acquisitions add about $2.2 billion to Fruit sales and bring with them about 23,000 employees. Charlie and I love it when we can acquire businesses that can be placed under managers, such as John Holland at Fruit, who have already shown their stuff at Berkshire. Mytech, for example, has made 14 acquisitions since we purchased it in 2001, and Gene Toombs has delivered results from these deals far in excess of what he had predicted. In effect, we leverage the managerial talent already with us by these tuck-in deals. We will make many more. We continue, however, to need elephants in order for us to use Berkshire's flood of incoming cash. Charlie and I must therefore ignore the pursuit of mice and focus our acquisition efforts on much bigger game. Our exemplar is the older man who crashed his grocery cart into that of a much younger fellow while both were shopping. The elderly man explained, apologetically, that he had lost track of his wife and was preoccupied searching for her. His new acquaintance said that by coincidence his wife had also wandered off, and suggested that it might be more efficient if they jointly looked for the two women. Agreeing, the older man asked his new companion what his wife looked like. "She's a gorgeous blonde," the fellow answered, "with a body that would cause a bishop to go through a stained glass window, and she's wearing tight white shorts." "How about yours?" The senior citizen wasted no words. "Forget her, we'll look for yours. What we are looking for is described on page 25. If you have an acquisition candidate that fits, call me day or night. And then watch me shatter a stained glass window." Now, let's examine the four major operating sectors of Berkshire. Lumping their financial figures together impedes analysis. So we'll look at them as four separate businesses, starting with the all-important insurance group. Insurance. Next month marks the 40th anniversary of our entrance into the insurance business. It was on the 9th of March 1967 that Berkshire purchased National Indemnity and its companion company National Fire and Marine from Jack Ringwalt for $8.6 million. Jack was a longtime friend of mine and an excellent but somewhat eccentric businessman. For about 10 minutes every year he would get urged to sell his company. But those moods, perhaps brought on by a tiff with regulators or an unfavorable jury verdict, quickly vanished. In the mid-1960 seconds, I asked investment banker Charlie Hyder, a mutual friend of mine and Jack's, to alert me the next time Jack was in heat. When Charlie's call came, I sped to meet Jack. We made a deal in a few minutes, with me waiving an audit, due diligence, or anything else that would give Jack an opportunity to reconsider. We just shook hands, and that was that. When we were due to close the purchase at Charlie's office, Jack was late. Finally arriving, he explained that he had been driving around looking for a parking meter with some unexpired time. That was a magic moment for me. I knew then that Jack was going to be my kind of manager. When Berkshire purchased Jack's two insurers, they had float of $17 million. We've regularly offered a long explanation of float in earlier reports, which you can read on our website. Simply put, float is money we hold, that is not ours but which we get to invest. At the end of 2006, our float had grown to $9 billion, and we have since written a huge retroactive reinsurance contract with Equitas, which I will describe in the next section, that boosts float by another $7 billion. Much of the gain we've made has come through our acquisition of other insurers, but we've also had outstanding internal growth, particularly at Ajit Jain's amazing reinsurance operation. Naturally, I had no notion in 1967 that our float would develop as it has. There's much to be said for just putting one foot in front of the other every day. The float from retroactive reinsurance contracts, of which we have many, automatically drifts down over time. Therefore, it will be difficult for us to increase float in the future unless we make new acquisitions in the insurance field. Whatever its size, however, the all-important cost of Berkshire's float over time is likely to be significantly below that of the industry, perhaps even falling to less than zero. Note the words, over time. There will be bad years periodically, you can be sure of that. In 2006, though, everything went right in insurance, really right. Our managers Tony Nicely, Geico, Ajit Jain, BH Reinsurance, Joe Brandon and Tad Montross, General Re, Don Worster, National Indemnity Primary, Tom Nerney, U.S. Liability, Tim Canisi, Medical Protective, Rod Eldred, Home State Companies and Cypress, Sid Farrank and Steve Menzies, Applied Underwriters, John Kaiser, Central States, and Don Towell, Kansas. Bankers Surety simply shot the lights out. When I recite their names, I feel as if I'm at Cooperstown, reading from the Hall of Fame roster. Of course, the overall insurance industry also had a terrific year in 2006. Butor managers delivered results generally superior to those of their competitors. Below is the tally on our underwriting and float for each major sector of insurance. Enjoy the view, because you won't soon see another like it. In 2007, our results from the bread and butter lines of insurance will deteriorate, though I think they will remain satisfactory. The big unknown is supercat insurance. Were the terrible hurricane seasons of 2004-05 aberrations? Or were they our planet's first warning that the climate of the 21st century will differ materially from what we've seen in the past? If the answer to the second question is yes, 2006 will soon be perceived as a misleading period of calm preceding a series of devastating storms. These could rock the insurance industry. It's naive to think of Katrina as anything close to a worst-case event. Neither Ajit Jain, who manages our supercat operation, nor I know what lies ahead. We do know that it would be a huge mistake to bet that evolving atmospheric changes are benign in their implications for insurers. Don't think, however, that we have lost our taste for risk. We remain prepared to lose $6 billion in a single event, if we have been paid appropriately for assuming that risk. We are not willing, though, to take one even very small exposures at prices that don't reflect our evaluation of loss probabilities. Appropriate prices don't guarantee profits in any given year, but inappropriate prices most certainly guarantee eventual losses. Rates have recently fallen because a flood of capital has entered the supercat field. We have therefore sharply reduced our wind exposures. Our behavior here parallels that which we employ in financial markets. Be fearful when others are greedy, and be greedy when others are fearful. Lloyd's, Equitas, and retroactive reinsurance. Last year, we are getting now to Equitas. Berkshire agreed to enter into a huge retroactive reinsurance contract, a policy that protects an insurer against losses that have already happened, but whose cost is not yet known. I'll give you details of the agreement shortly. But let's first take a journey through insurance history, following the route that led to our deal. Our tale begins around 1688, when Edward Lloyd opened a small coffeehouse in London. Though no Starbucks, his shop was destined to achieve worldwide fame because of the commercial activities of its clientele: shipowners, merchants, and venturesome British capitalists. As these parties sipped Edward's brew, they began to write contracts transferring the risk of a disaster at sea from the owners of ships and their cargo to the capitalists, who wagered that a given voyage would be completed without incident. These capitalists eventually became known as underwriters at Lloyd's. Though many people believe Lloyd's to be an insurance company, that is not the case. It is instead a place where many member insurers transact business, just as they did centuries ago. Over time, the underwriters solicited passive investors to join in syndicates. Additionally, the business broadened beyond marine risks into every imaginable form of insurance, including exotic coverages that spread the fame of Lloyd's far and wide. The underwriters left the coffee house, found grander quarters and formalized some rules of association, and those persons who passively backed the underwriters became known as names. Eventually, the names came to include many thousands of people from around the world, who joined expecting to pick up some extra change without effort or serious risk. True, prospective names were always solemnly told that they would have unlimited and everlasting liability for the consequences of their syndicate's underwriting, down to the last cufflink, as the quaint description went. But that warning came to be viewed as perfunctory. 300 years of retained cufflinks acted as a powerful sedative to the names poised to sign up. Then came asbestos. When its prospective costs were added to the tidal wave of environmental and product claims that surfaced in the 1,980 seconds, Lloyd's began to implode. Policies written decades earlier and largely forgotten about were developing huge losses. No one could intelligently estimate their total, but it was certain to be many tens of billions of dollars. The specter of unending and unlimited losses terrified existing names and scared away prospects. Many names opted for bankruptcy. Some even chose a suicide. From these shambles there came a desperate effort to resuscitate Lloyd's. In 1996, the powers that be at the institution allotted £1 billion to a new company, Equitas, and made it responsible for paying all claims on policies written before 1993. In effect, this plan pooled the misery of the many syndicates in trouble. Of course, the money allotted could prove to be insufficient, and if that happened, the names remained liable for the shortfall. But the new plan, by concentrating all of the liabilities in one place, had the advantage of eliminating much of the costly intramural squabbling that went on among syndicates. Moreover, the pooling allowed claims evaluation, negotiation and litigation to be handled more intelligently than had been the case previously. Equitas embraced Ben Franklin's thinking. We must all hang together, or assuredly we shall hang separately. From the start, many people predicted Equitas would eventually fail. But as Ajit and I reviewed the facts in the spring of 2006, 3 years after the last exposed policy had been written, and after the payment of £11.3 billion in claims, we concluded that the patient was likely to survive. And so we decided to offer a huge reinsurance policy to Equitas. Because plenty of imponderables continue to exist, Berkshire could not provide Equitas, and its 27,972 names, unlimited protection. But we said, and I'm simplifying, that if Equitas would give us $7.12 billion in cash-hand securities, this is the float I spoke about, we would pay all of its future claims and expenses up to $13.9 billion. That amount was $5.7 billion above what Equitas had recently guessed its ultimate liabilities to be. Thus, the names received a huge and almost certainly sufficient amount of future protection against unpleasant surprises. Indeed, the protection is so large that Equitas plans a cash payment to its thousands of names, an event few of them had ever dreamed possible. And how will Berkshire fare? That depends on how much known claims will end up costing us, how many yet to be presented claims will surface and what they will cost, how soon claim payments will be made, and how much we earn on the cash we receive before it must be paid out. Ajit and I think the odds are in our favor. And should we be wrong, Berkshire can handle it. Scott Moser, the CEO of Equitas, summarized the transaction neatly. Names wanted to sleep easy at night, and we think we've just bought them the world's best mattress, and DD quo. Warning. It's time to eat your broccoli. I am now going to talk about accounting matters. I owe this to those Berkshire shareholders who love reading about debits and credits. I hope both of you find this discussion helpful. All others can skip this section, there will be no quiz. Berkshire has done many retroactive transactions in both number and amount, a multiple of such policies entered into by any other insurer. We are the reinsurer of choice for these coverages, because the obligations that are transferred to us, for example, lifetime indemnity and medical payments to be made to injured workers, may not be fully satisfied for 50 years or more. No other company can offer the certainty that Berkshire can, in terms of guaranteeing the full and fair settlement of these obligations. This fact is important to the original insurer, policyholders, and regulators. The accounting procedure for retroactive transactions is neither well known or intuitive. The The best way for shareholders to understand it, therefore, is for us to simply lay out the debits and credits. Charlie and I would like to see this done more often. We sometimes encounter accounting footnotes about important transactions that leave us baffled, and we go away suspicious that the reporting company wished it that way. For example, try comprehending transactions described in the old 10Ks of Enron, even after you know how the movie ended. So, let us summarize our accounting for the Aquitas transaction. The major debits will be to cash and investments, reinsurance recoverable, and deferred charges for reinsurance assumed, DCRA. The major credit will be to reserve for losses and loss adjustment expense. No profit or loss will be recorded at the inception of the transaction, but underwriting losses will thereafter be incurred annually, as the DCRA asset is amortized downward. The amount of the annual amortization charge will be primarily determined by how our end-of-the-year estimates as to the timing and amount of future loss payments compare to the estimates made at the beginning of the year. Eventually, when the last claim has been paid, the DCRA account will be reduced to zero. That day is 50 years or more away. What's important to remember is that retroactive insurance contracts always produce underwriting losses for us. Whether these losses are worth experiencing depends on whether the cash we have received produces investment income that exceeds the losses. Recently, our DCRA charge shave annually delivered $300 million or so of underwriting losses, which have been more than offset by the income we have realized through use of the cash we received as a premium. Absent new retroactive contracts, the amount of the annual charge would normally decline over time. After the Aquitas transaction, however, the annual DCRA cost will initially increase to about $450 million a year. This means that our other insurance operations must generate at least that much underwriting gain for our overall float to be cost-free. That amount is quite a hurdle, but one that I believe we will clear in many, if not most, years. Aren't you glad that I promised you there would be no quiz? Manufacturing, service, and retailing operations. Our activities in this part of Berkshire cover the waterfront. Let's look, though, at a summary balance sheet and earnings statement for the entire group. This motley group, which sells products ranging from lollipops to motorhomes, earned a pleasing 25% on average tangible net worth last year. It's noteworthy also that these operations used only minor financial leverage in achieving that return. Clearly, we own some terrific businesses. We purchased many of them, however, at large premiums to net worth, a point reflected in the goodwill item shown on the balance sheet, and that fact reduces the earnings on our average carrying value to 10.8%. Here are a few newsworthy items about companies in this sector. Bob Shaw, a remarkable entrepreneur who from a standing start built Shaw Industries into the country's largest carpet producer, elected last year, at age 75, to retire. To succeed him, Bob recommended Vance Bell, a 31-year veteran at Shaw, and Bob, as usual, made the right call. Weakness in housing has caused the carpet business to slow. Shaw, however, remains a powerhouse and a major contributor to Berkshire's earnings. Mitech, a manufacturer of connectors for roof trusses at the time we purchased it, in 2001, is developing into a mini conglomerate. At their rate, it is growing. In fact, mini may soon be inappropriate. In purchasing Mitech for $420 million, we lent the company $200 million at 9% and bought $198 million of stock, priced at $10,000 per share. Additionally, 55 employees bought 2,200 shares for $22 million. Each employee paid exactly the same price that we did, in most cases borrowing money to do so. And are they ever glad they did? 5 years later, Mitech sales have tripled, and the stock is valued at $71,699 per share. Despite its making 4 acquisitions, at a cost of $291 million, Mitech has paid off its debt to Berkshire and holds $35 million of cash. We celebrated the 5th anniversary of our purchase with a party in July. I told the group that it would be embarrassing if Mitech's stock price soared beyond that of Berkshire A shares. Don't be surprised, however, if that happens, though Charlie and I will try to make our shares a moving target. Not all of our businesses are destined to increase profits. When an industry's underlying economics are crumbling, talented management may slow the rate of decline. Eventually, though, eroding fundamentals will overwhelm managerial brilliance. As a wise friend told me long ago, if you want to get a reputation as a good businessman, be sure to get into a good business. And fundamentals are definitely eroding in the newspaper industry, a trend that has caused the profits of our Buffalo News to decline. The skid will almost certainly continue. When Charlie and I were young, the newspaper business was as easy a way to make huge returns as existed in America. As one not too bright publisher famously said, "I owe my fortune to two great American institutions, monopoly and nepotism." No paper in a one-paper city, however bad the product or however inept the management, could avoid gushing profits. The industry's staggering returns could be simply explained. For most of the 20th century, newspapers were the primary source of information for the American public. Whether the subject was sports, finance, or politics, newspapers reigned supreme. Just as important, their ads were the easiest way to find job opportunities or to learn the price of groceries at your town's supermarkets. The great majority of families therefore felt the need for a paper every day, but understandably most didn't wish to pay for two. Advertisers preferred the paper with the most circulation, and readers tended to want the paper with the most ads and news pages. This circularity led to a law of the newspaper jungle: survival of the fattest. Thus, when two or more papers existed in a major city, which was almost universally the case a century ago, the one that pulled ahead usually emerged as the standalone winner. After competition disappeared, the paper's pricing power in both advertising and circulation was unleashed. Typically, rates for both advertisers and readers would be raised annually, and the profits rolled in. For owners, this was economic heaven. Interestingly, though papers regularly, and often in a disapproving way, reported on the profitability of, say, the auto or steel industries, they never enlightened readers about their own Midas-like situation. As long ago as my 1991 letter to shareholders, I nonetheless asserted that this insulated world was changing, writing that the media businesses will prove considerably less marvelous than the industry, or lenders thought would be the case only a few years ago. Some publishers took umbrage at both this remark and other warnings from me that followed. Newspaper properties, moreover, continued to tossle as if they were indestructible slot machines. In fact, many intelligent newspaper executives who regularly chronicled and analyzed important worldwide events were either blind or indifferent to what was going on under their noses. Now, however, almost all newspaper owners realize that they are constantly losing ground in the battle for eyeballs. Simply put, if cable and satellite broadcasting, as well as the internet, had come along first, newspapers as we know them probably would never have existed. In Berkshire's world, Stan Lipsey does a terrific job running the Buffalo News, and I am enormously proud of its editor, Margaret Sullivan. The News's penetration of its market is the highest among that of this country's large newspapers. We also do better financially than most metropolitan newspapers, even though Buffalo's population and business trends are not good. Nevertheless, this operation faces unrelenting pressures that will cause profit margins to slide. True, we have the leading online news operation in Buffalo, and it will continue to attract more viewers and ads. However, the economic potential of a newspaper internet site, given the many alternative sources of information and entertainment that are free and only a click away, is at best a small fraction of that existing in the past for a print newspaper facing no competition. For a local resident, ownership of a city's paper, like ownership of a sports team, still produces instant prominence. With it, typically comes power and influence. These are rub-offs that appeal to many people with money. Beyond that, civic-minded, wealthy individuals may feel that local ownership will serve their community well. That's why Peter Kiewit bought the Omaha paper more than 40 years ago. We are likely therefore to see non-economic individual buyers of newspapers emerge, just as we have seen such buyers acquire major sports franchises. Aspiring press lords should be careful, however. There's no rule that says a newspaper's revenues can't fall below its expenses and that losses can't mushroom. Fixed costs are high in the newspaper business, and that's bad news when unit volume heads south. As the importance of newspapers diminishes, moreover, the psychic value of possessing one will wane, whereas owning a sports franchise will likely retain its cachet. Unless we face an irreversible cash drain, we will stick with the news, just as we've said that we would. Read Economic Principle 11, on page 76. Charlie and I love newspapers. We each read 5 a day, and believe that a free and energetic press is a key ingredient for maintaining a great democracy. We hope that some combination of print and online will ward off economic doomsday for newspapers, and we will work hard in Buffalo to develop a sustainable business model. I think we will be successful, but the days of lush profits from our newspaper are over. A much improved situation is emerging at NetJets, which sells and manages fractionally owned aircraft. This company has never had a problem growing. Revenues from flight operations have increased 596% since our purchase in 1998, but profits had been erratic. Our move to Europe, which began in 1996, was particularly expensive. After 5 years of operation there, we had acquired only 80 customers. And by mid-year 2006, our cumulative pre-tax loss had risen to $212 million. But European demand has now exploded, with a net of 589 customers having been added in 2005 to 2006. Under Mark Booth's brilliant leadership, NetJets is now operating profitably in Europe, and we expect the positive trend to continue. Our U.S. operation also had a good year in 2006, which led to worldwide pre-tax earnings of $143 million at NetJets last year. We made this profit even though we suffered a loss of $19 million in the first quarter. Credit Rich Santulli, along with Mark, for this turnaround. Rich, like many of our managers, has no financial need to work, but you'd never know it. He's absolutely tireless monitoring operations, making sales, and traveling the globe to constantly widen the already enormous lead that NetJets enjoys over its competitors. Today, the value of the fleet we manage is far greater than that managed by our 3 largest competitors combined. There's a reason NetJets is the runaway leader. It offers the ultimate in safety and service. At Berkshire, and at a number of our subsidiaries, NetJets aircraft are an indispensable business tool. I also have a contract for personal use with NetJets, and so do members of my family and most Berkshire directors. None of us, I should add, gets a discount. Once you've flown NetJets, returning to commercial flights is like going back to holding hands. Regulated utility business. Berkshire has an 86.6% fully diluted interest in MidAmerican Energy Holdings, which owns a wide variety of utility operations. The largest of these are 1. Yorkshire Electricity, and Northern Electric, whose 3.7 million electric customers make it the 3rd largest distributor of electricity in the U.K. 2. MidAmerican Energy, which serves 706,000 electric customers, primarily in Iowa. 3. Pacific Power and Rocky Mountain Power, serving about 1.7 million electric customers in 6 western states. And 4. Kern River and Northern Natural Pipelines, which carry about 8% of the natural gas consumed in the U.S. Our partners in ownership of MidAmerican are Walter Scott, and its 2 terrific managers, Dave Sokol and Greg Abel. It's unimportant how many votes each party has. We will make major moves only when we are unanimous in thinking them wise. 6 years of working with Dave, Greg and Walter have underscored my original belief. Berkshire couldn't have better partners. Somewhat incongruously, MidAmerican owns the 2nd largest real estate brokerage firm in the U.S., Home Services of America. This company operates through 20 locally branded firms with 20,300 agents. Despite Home Services' purchase of 2 operations last year, the company's over volume fell 9% to $58 billion, and profits fell 50%. The slowdown in residential real estate activity stems in part from the weakened lending practices of recent years. The optional contracts and teaser rates that have been popular have allowed borrowers to make payments in the early years of their mortgages that fall far short of covering normal interest costs. Naturally, there are few defaults when virtually nothing is required of a borrower. As a cynic has said, a rolling loan gathers no loss. But payments not made add to principal, and borrowers who can't afford normal monthly payments early on are hit later with above normal monthly obligations. This is the Scarlett O'Hara scenario. I'll think about that tomorrow. For many homeowners, tomorrow has now arrived. Consequently, there is a huge overhang of offerings in several of Home Services markets. Nevertheless, we will be seeking to purchase additional brokerage operations. A decade from now, Home Services will almost certainly be much larger. Here are some key figures on MidAmerican's operations. Finance and financial products. You will be happy to hear, and I'm even happier that this will be my last discussion of the losses at Gen Re's derivative operation. When we started to wind this business down early in 2002, we had 23,218 contracts outstanding. Now we have 197. Our cumulative pre-tax loss from this operation totals $409 million, but only $5 million occurred in 2006. Charlie says that if we had properly classified the $409 million on our 2001 balance sheet, it would have been labeled good until reached for. In any event, a Shakespearean thought slightly modified seems appropriate for the tombstone of this derivative business. All's well that ends. We've also wound up our investment in Value Capital. So earnings or losses from these two lines of business are making their final appearance in the table that annually appears in this section. Clayton Homes remains an anomaly in the manufactured housing industry, which last year recorded its lowest unit sales since 1962. Indeed, the industry's volume last year was only about one-third that of 1,999. Outside of Clayton, I doubt if the industry, overall, made any money in 2006. Yet Clayton earned $513 million pre-tax and paid Berkshire an additional $86 million as a fee for our obtaining the funds to finance Clayton's $10 billion portfolio of installment receivables. Berkshire's financial strength has clearly been of huge help to Clayton, but the driving force behind the company's success is Kevin Clayton. Kevin knows the business forward and backward, is a rational decision maker and a joy to work with. Because of acquisitions, Clayton now employs 14,787 people, compared to 6,661 at the time of our purchase. We have two leasing operations: Court Furniture, run by Paul Arnold, and Extra Truck Trailers, run by Bill Franz. Court's earnings improved significantly last year, and Extra's remained at the high level attained in 2005. We continue to look for tuck-in acquisitions to be run by Paul or Bill, and also are open to ideas for new leasing opportunities. Here's a breakdown of earnings in this sector. Investments. We show below our common stock investments. With two exceptions, those that had a market value of more than $700 million at the end of 2006 are itemized. We don't itemize the two securities referred to, which have a market value of $1.9 billion, because we continue to buy them. I could of course tell you their names, but then I would have to kill you. We are delighted by the 2006 business performance of virtually all of our investees. Last year, we told you that our expectation was that these companies in aggregate would increase their earnings by 6% to 8% annually, a rate that would double their earnings every 10 years or so. In 2006, American Express, Coca-Cola, Procter & Gamble, and Wells Fargo, our largest holdings, increased per-share earnings by 18%, 9%, 8%, and 11%. These are stellar results, and we thank their CEOs. We've come close to eliminating our direct foreign exchange position, from which we realized about $186 million in pre-tax profits in 2006 earnings that were included in the finance and financial products table shown earlier. That brought our total gains since inception of this position in 2002 to $2.2 billion. Here's a breakdown by currency. We've made large indirect currency profits as well, though I've never tallied the precise amount. For example, in 2002 to 2003, we spent about $82 million buying of all things Enron bonds, some of which were denominated in euros. Already we've received distributions of $179 million from these bonds, and our remaining stake is worth $173 million. That means our overall gain is $270 million, part of which came from the appreciation of the euro that took place after our bond purchase. When we first began making foreign exchange purchases, interest-rated differentials between the U.S. and most foreign countries favored a direct currency position, but that spread turned negative in 2005. We therefore looked for other ways to gain foreign currency exposure, such as the ownership of foreign equities or of U.S. stocks with major earnings abroad. The currency factor, we should emphasize, is not dominant in our selection of equities, but is merely one of many considerations. As our U.S. trade problems worsen, the probability that the dollar will weaken over time continues to be high. I fervently believe in real trade, the more the better for both us and the world. We had about $1.44 trillion of this honest-to-God trade in 2006. But the U.S. also had $76 trillion of pseudo-trade last year, imports for which we exchanged no goods or services. Ponder, for a moment, how commentators would describe the situation if our imports were $76 trillion, a full 6% of GDP, and WED had no exports. Making these purchases that weren't reciprocated by sales, the U.S. necessarily transferred ownership of its assets or IOUs to the rest of the world. Like a very wealthy but self-indulgent family, we peeled off a bite off what we owned in order to consume more than we produced. The U.S. can do a lot of this because we are an extraordinarily rich country that has behaved responsibly in the past. The world is therefore willing to accept our bonds, real estate, stocks, and businesses. and we have a vast store of these to hand over. These transfers will have consequences, however. Already the prediction I made last year about one fallout from our spending binge has come true. The investment income account of our country, positive in every previous year since 1915, turned negative in 2006. Foreigners now earn more on their U.S. investments than we do on our investments abroad. In effect, we've used up our bank account and turned to our credit card. And, like every who gets in hock, the U.S. will now experience reverse compounding as we pay ever-increasing amounts of interest on interest. I want to emphasize that even though our course is unwise, Americans will live better 10 or 20 years from now than they do today. Per capita wealth will increase. But our citizens will also be forced every year to ship a significant portion of their current production abroad, merely to service the cost of our huge debtor position. It won't be pleasant to work part of each day to pay for the overconsumption of your ancestors. I believe that at some point in the future, U.S. workers and voters will find this annual tribute sonorous that there will be a severe political backlash. How that will play out in markets is impossible to predict, but to expect a soft landing seems like wishful thinking. I should mention that all of the direct currency profits we have realized have come from forward contracts, which are derivatives, and that we have entered into other types of derivatives contracts at, well, that may seem odd, since you know of our expensive experience in unwinding the derivatives book at Genray, and also have heard me talk of the systemic problems that could result from the enormous growth in the use of derivatives. Why, you may wonder, are we fooling around with such potentially toxic material? The answer is that derivatives, just like stocks and bonds, are sometimes wildly mispriced. For many years, accordingly, we have selectively written derivative contracts, few in number but sometimes for large dollar amounts. We currently have 62 contracts outstanding. I manage them personally, and they are free of counterparty credit risk. So far, these derivative contracts have worked out well for us, producing pre-tax profits in the hundreds of millions of dollars, above and beyond the gains I've itemized from forward foreign exchange contracts. Though we will experience losses from time to time, we are likely to continue to earn overall significant profits from mispriced derivatives. I have told you that Berkshire has 3 outstanding candidates to replace me as CEO, and that the board knows exactly who should take over if I should tonight. Each of the 3 is much younger than I. The directors believe it's important that my successor have the prospect of a long tenure. Frankly, we are not as well prepared on the investment side of our business. There's a history here. At one time, Charlie was my potential replacement for investing, and more recently Lou Simpson has filled that slot. Lou is a top-notch investor with an outstanding long-term record of managing Geico's equity portfolio. But he is only 6 years younger than I. If I were to die soon, he would fill in magnificently for a short period. For the long term, though, we need a different answer. At our October board meeting, we discussed that subject fully, and we merged with a plan, which I will carry out with the help of Charlie and Lou. Under this plan, I intend to hire a younger man or woman with the potential to manage a very large portfolio, who we hope will succeed me as Berkshire's chief investment officer when the need for someone to do that arises. As part of the selection process, we may in fact take on several candidates. Picking the right persons will not be an easy task. It's not hard, of course, to find smart people, among them individuals who have impressive investment records. But there is far more to successful long-term investing than brains and performance that has recently been good. Over time, markets will do extraordinary, even bizarre, things. A single big mistake could wipe out a long string of successes. We therefore need someone genetically programmed to recognize and avoid serious risks, including those never before encountered. Certain perils that lurk in investment strategies cannot be spotted by use of the models commonly employed today by financial institutions. Temperament is also important. Independent thinking, emotional stability, and a keen understanding of both human and institutional behavior is vital to long-term investment success. I've seen a lot of very smart people who have lacked these virtues. Finally, we have a special problem to consider: our ability to keep the person we hire. Being able to list Berkshire on a resume would materially enhance the marketability of an investment manager. We will need, therefore, to be sure we can retain our choice, even though he or she could leave and make much more money elsewhere. There are surely people who fit what we need, but they may be hard to identify. In 1979, Jack Byrne and I felt we had found such a person in Lou Simpson. We then made an arrangement with him whereby he would be paid well for sustained overperformance. Under this deal, he has earned large amounts. Lou, however, could have left us long ago to manage far greater sums on more advantageous terms. If money alone had been the object, that's exactly what he would have done. But Lou never considered such a move. We need to find a younger person or two made of the same stuff. The good news. At 76, I feel terrific and, according to all measurable indicators, am in excellent health. It's amazing what cherry coke and hamburgers will do for a fellow. Some changes on Berkshire's board. The composition of our board will change in two ways this spring. One change will involve the Chase family, which has been connected to Berkshire and its predecessor companies for more than a century. In 1929, the first Malcolm G. Chase played an important role in merging 4 New England textile operations into Berkshire Fine Spinning Associates. That company merged with Hathaway Manufacturing in 1955 to form Berkshire Hathaway, and Malcolm G. Chase Jr. became its chairman. Early in 1965, Malcolm arranged for Buffett Partnership Limited to buy a key block of Berkshire shares, and welcomed us as the new controlling shareholder of the company. Malcolm continued as non-executive chairman until 1969. He was both a wonderful gentleman and helpful partner. That description also fits his son, Malcolm Kim Chase, who succeeded his father on Berkshire's board in 1992. But last year Kim, now actively and successfully running a community bank that he founded in 1996, suggested that we find a younger person to replace him on our board. We have done so, and Kim will step down as a director at the annual meeting. I owe much to the Chases, and wish to thank Kim for his many years of service to Berkshire. In selecting a new director, we were guided by our long-standing criteria, which are that board members be owner-oriented, business-savvy, interested and truly independent. I say truly, because many directors who are now deemed independent by various authorities and observers are far from that, relying heavily as they do on directors' fees to maintain their standard of living. These payments, which come in many forms, often range between $150,000 and $250,000 annually, compensation that may approach or even exceed all other income of the independent director. And surprise director compensation has soared in recent years, pushed up by recommendations from corporate America's favorite consultant, Ratchet and Bingo. The name may be phony, but the action it conveys is not. Charlie and I believe our 4 criteria are essential if directors are to do their job, which, by law, is to faithfully represent owners. Yet these criteria are usually ignored. Instead, consultants and CEOs seeking board candidates will often say, "We're looking for a woman, or a Hispanic, or someone from abroad, or what have you." It sometimes sounds as if the mission is Tostok Noah's Ark. Over the years I've been queried many times about potential directors, and have yet to hear anyone ask, "Does he think like an intelligent owner?" The questions I instead get would sound ridiculous to someone seeking candidates for, say, a football team, or an arbitration panel, or a military command. In those cases, the selectors would look for people who had the specific talents and attitudes that were required for a specialized job. At Berkshire, we are in the specialized activity of running a business well, and therefore we seek business judgment. That's exactly what we found in Susan Decker, CFO of Yahoo, who will join our board at the annual meeting. We are lucky to have her. She scores very high on our 4 criteria, and additionally, at 44, is young, an attribute, as you may have noticed, that your chairman has long lacked. We will seek more young directors in the future, but never by slighting the 4 qualities that we insist upon. This and that. Berkshire will pay about $4 billion in federal income tax on its 2006 earnings. In its last fiscal year, the U.S. government spent $2.6 trillion, or about $7 billion per day. Thus, for more than half of one day, Berkshire picked up the tab for all federal expenditures, ranging from Social Security and Medicare payments to the cost of our armed services. Had there been only 600 taxpayers like Berkshire, no one else in America would have needed to pay any federal income or payroll taxes. Our federal return last year, we should add, ran to 9,386 pages. To handle this filing, state and foreign tax returns, a myriad of SEC requirements, and all of the other matters involved in running Berkshire, we have gone all the way up to 19 employees at World Headquarters. This crew occupies 9,708 square feet of space, and Charlie at World Headquarters West in Los Angeles uses another 655 square feet. Our home office payroll, including benefits and counting both locations, totaled $3,531,978 last year. We're careful when spending your money. Corporate bigwigs often complain about government spending, criticizing bureaucrats who they say spend taxpayers' money differently from how they would if it were their own. But sometimes the financial behavior of executives will also vary based on whose wallet is getting depleted. Here's an illustrative tale from my days at Salomon. In the 1980 seconds, the company had a barber, Jimmy by name, who came in weekly to give free haircuts to the top brass. A manicurist was also on tap. Then, because of a cost-cutting drive, patrons were told to pay their own way. One top executive, not the CEO, who had previously visited Jimmy weekly went immediately to Aunt's every 3-week schedule. Every now and then, Charlie and I catch on early to a tide-like trend, one brimming over with commercial promise. For example, though American Airlines, with its miles, and American Express, with credit card points, are credited as being trailblazers in granting customers rewards, Charlie and I were far ahead of them in spotting the appeal of this powerful idea. Excited by our insight, the two of us jumped into the reward business way back in 1970 by buying control of a trading stamp operation, Blue Chip Stamps. In that year, Blue Chip had sales of $126 million, and its stamps papered California. In 1970, indeed, about 60 billion of our stamps were licked by savers, pasted into books, and taken to Blue Chip redemption stores. Our catalog of free words was 116 pages thick and chock full of tantalizing items. When I was told that even certain brothels and mortuaries gave stamps to their patrons, I felt I had finally found a sure thing.